So I just told you the story, and storytelling and linking is where you take the different objects that you want to memorize, and you've created memory objects, which we haven't talked about yet, and you link those memory objects into a story. And that's a way to very quickly remember 10, 20, 30 pieces of information and to be able to remember them in order. So let's go over our story and see if we can figure out what was going on. So what the heck was that story all about? Let's see what those memory objects were. And I'm gonna have you take a little quiz to see how you did. But first off, think about that story. And what I want you to do right now is to take the form in front of you, and I want you to see if you can tell me that story back. Okay? So we start off on our cliff, right? And I want you to walk through the story, and as much as possible, I want you to tell me that story. So as you're going through that story, I want you to think about what the memory objects were. Okay, so we look up there and we see a cliff, and on top of the cliff there's a dragon that's staring at you and smiling and waving hi. And that's my hi dragon, right? So that's my first memory object. And you're going to see that these link to something that you might need to memorize at some point, which are the first 10 elements of the periodic table of elements. Now, you may not know what the periodic table of elements, or you might be an expert on the periodic table of elements. But if you need to memorize the 113 elements or whatever it is, then that might be a challenge if you're not familiar with them. I want to make sure that everybody knows what we're doing, what we're not doing. I'm not teaching you chemistry. I'm not teaching you history. I'm not teaching you geography. What I'm doing is I'm giving you tools to take the stuff that you're learning and turning them into memory objects. And so as we're going through that story, we take hydrogen and we turn it into a hi dragon. Now, why is that important? It's because I can visualize a dragon waving hi to me. I can't visualize hydrogen. But my brain works better on things I can visualize, things that I could actually reach out and touch, than it does on what are called abstract concepts, like dates are abstract concepts, or battles might be abstract concepts. Until you get it down into an object, then it's not something that you can visualize. And once you can visualize it, you can do cool things with it. And we're going to do cool things with these memory objects. But we have to first get good at turning the fact or the concept into the memory object. So we take hydrogen and we take hydrogen and we create the memory object hydrogen. Then the hydrogen jumps off the cliff and catches a helium balloon midair. Well, the helium balloon is my memory object for helium, and we'll talk about why that's a good one later. Some of these memory objects are easy to create. Like when you hear helium, you probably think helium balloon. When you hear hydrogen, you might have to turn that into hydrogen. All right, so we'll talk in the next slide about how to make up memory objects, but this is where it goes. And then the hydrogen starts looking for a place to land, and at the bottom of the canyon, there's a thumb statue that has a candle on top of it. Well, what is that? That's a lit thumb, which stands for lithium. The dragon gets burned by landing on the thumb, and he flies over to a nearby river to cool down. Now, next to where the dragon lands, a bear is eating fish. Remember, that bear is just going, grabbing those fish. He's delighted. And he then grabs an eel, right? And you can visualize what an eel is. And he starts chomping on it and smiling and saying, yum. Bear eating the eel, saying yum. Well, that is my memory object for beryllium. Now, that's a jump. Remember what we said. This is silly. This is stupid. This takes too long. But what we're doing is we're going to develop the ability to get good at turning these facts, these DTR concepts, these decide to remember concepts, into images. So then the bear finishes, he throws the eel over his shoulder, and it lands on the desk of the student who is so bored that even when the eel lands on it, he's still yawning. Well, what is that? That's my image for boron, boring, okay? Then a car with a giant hot dog bun swoops by and grabs the eel off the desk. What's that? Carbon, carbon. And then a night dragon, nitrogen, swoops down, picks up the car bun and flies away. Does anybody remember what happens next? He drops it into a lake, but down in the lake, there's somebody there. You remember what it is? It's a scuba diver, and on his back, he has an oxygen tank. So that's number 8, oxygen. And then the car hits the lake, the wave knocks the scuba diver onto the bank of the lake, and there's a whole bed of flowers, but they're not flowers, they're toothbrushes with toothpaste on them. And that is our image for fluorine. Now, some people know that fluorine, that might be a good image. There may be another one. One of the things that we're going to talk about is how you create your own memory objects. Another one for that might be a floor clean. So he might go to the edge of the bank, and instead of dirt there, it's just this clean floor, this floor clean. All we need to do is create an object that we're telling our brain, we want to remember this. We have an image, and one of the things I'll talk about is that this doesn't do all the work for you. What it does is it gives you a hook. So now you can sit there and replay the story in your brain. And at the end, he looks up and he sees a restaurant, and on the restaurant there's a sign, and it says, "Welcome Divers," and at the "Welcome Divers" is neon. So most people know a neon sign looks like. So that's an easy memory object to do. So the first question is, how did you do in terms of remembering the story? And then what I didn't do is I didn't introduce the memory objects in advance. I wanted to do the storytelling first and then show you how we can turn facts, DTR facts, into the memory objects. So what do you remember? Do you remember right now what memory object comes after beryllium? So what's your memory object for beryllium? It's the bear eating the eel and saying yum. So what happens next? Okay, so then what memory object or element comes before carbon? Okay, now that's actually interesting. I didn't realize it when I wrote that. That's the same object, right? That's boron. It's the student who is bored. So if you can remember the memory object, and then you've had exposure to the DTR concept, then those two things you're going to be able to link in your brain.